Hey everyone, and welcome to another long overdue episode of Black Moth Radio, where we make working from home work for you. And in our neck of the woods, every day is already Bring Your Kid to Work Day. And even more so in the great state of Oklahoma, because our state is starting on week 2 of a teacher strike. We support our teachers, and we're glad that you stuck to your core beliefs and did more than ask for a raise, which you certainly deserved. You want better funding for your students and schools, and for that we applaud you. Education is not partisan, it's mandatory. In fact, before we get started with our topic, I'd like to tell you a little bit about a couple of the teachers who gave me a love for writing. The first one, her name was Mrs. Wright. I had Mrs. Wright in the 3rd grade at an inner city elementary school, John Adams, in Oklahoma City. I think we had probably 40 kids in that class, and every day Mrs. Wright would lay out piles of various worksheets. And we had a routine as a class. You would come up, took one of each worksheet, staple it together, and go back to your desk. Those were the things you had to get done during the school day. We called them daily packets. She would teach what we needed to know at the front of the room, and then pretty much just turn us loose to do our work. Of course, if we had questions, we could go and ask her. She would work with us, make sure that we understood what we needed to know. Even back then, around 1988, I could just fly through my work. The rule was if you finished before everyone else, you could color, play a game, whatever. It didn't really matter as long as you were fairly quiet. And I tried really hard to be quiet. I didn't go out of my way to be loud. I left the other students alone for the most part. I've always been sort of a loner. My problem was I got bored. I didn't want to color every day. I didn't want to play games. 1988's back in the days before, you had smart tablets or smart anything. So I'd dig around on my desk, I'd use markers and pencils to try to build things, whatever. And the problem was it was a distraction to the other kids. Also, I was often louder than I intended to be. So, Mrs. Wright made a new assignment just for me. Every day when I finished my work, I had to go and get the unabridged dictionary from the shelf and pick 12 new words. I had to write out the words along with the definitions. Then I had to write a story that used all 12 of those words. When you're 8 and you have like a notebook and a pencil, that can take a while. Computers weren't a big thing in the 80s. And I guess it had to have been before 1988. I'd probably say it was 1986 or so. But still, computers weren't a big thing in the 80s, especially in schools. You went to the computer lab maybe once a month and you played Oregon Trail. That started my love affair with words. I wrote my first book the following year. I saw Mrs. Wright only a couple of more times after that school year. She was a sub for my class in the 5th grade in a totally different school district, and I saw her once in middle school where she subbed again. Mrs. Wright taught me to love words, and Miss Grove taught me how to effectively use them. Miss Grove taught my 11th grade English class. It was an advanced placement class. Each day, we read a short narrative, or we answered a question, or we had to write about a current event. Again, this is back before typing was extremely common. We had 55 minutes in class to write that essay. They were graded on a scale of 1 to 5 because at the end of that year we were all going to take a test that would determine if we could use what we had learned for college credit. 5 was the highest that you could score on that test, so that's why our essays were also graded 1 to 5. The essay had to be front and back of at least one sheet of paper. We could not write in first person unless the prompt required us to write about ourselves. We had to use what I refer to as limited third person. We couldn't use you, but we could use we, they, them, their. Also, we learned to eliminate as many be verbs, as Miss Grove called them, as possible. So we learned to write without relying on is, are, was, were, have, has, had, be, been, has been, had been, and have been. You learn pretty quick how to write an active voice just by taking that one rule and applying it. I still use her principles every day when I work on content. So teachers, I salute you. I praise you. Keep up the good fight. You never know which kid with the threadbare clothing who looks malnourished and generally wants to be left alone will take to your teaching and use it later in life to become something great and get themselves out of a bad situation. Okay, so let's move on to the topic du jour. How can you make a client choose you for a high-paying gig instead of them choosing someone else? This was a question that was actually asked of me by a new freelancer through Facebook. Before I talk about the specific method that I use to engage clients on Upwork, I want to start by talking about a few freelancing basic principles. Basic principle 1, if you have little to no experience on Upwork, it's going to be challenging, but it's not impossible to do this. You need to make sure that your profile is complete. Your profile allows clients to get to know you, so you need to write it in a way that makes clients want to talk to you. You need to have samples of your work ready to send even if you don't place them on Upwork. If you have little to no Upwork experience, make sure that you look for some gigs to help you get good feedback. I'm not necessarily talking about slave wage gigs on there, but if you're a writer and you have experience in a certain area and someone has a budget of 2 cents a word for an article that you know you can write fast, write it, get paid, get the feedback. The sooner you can establish a history of good feedback, the sooner you'll make better money. Basic principle number 2, be mindful of how you're using your application credits. Read the entire job posting. Scroll down and look at the number of people invited and how many people are being interviewed. If they've already invited 3 people and they're interviewing 2 or all 3 of those people, they know who they want to hire. So bidding on it for you is probably a waste of your time and your application credit, especially if you weren't invited, because if you're invited, it doesn't cost you anything credit-wise to go through the process. So also, it's probably a giant waste of your time and application credits if the job has 50 plus applicants and there's not been any activity on the job in a long time. And you can see the last time that the client looked at that job posting. So make sure that when you're looking at job postings that you're reading not just the listing itself, scroll down a little bit, make sure you're looking at those numbers and statistics. And another thing that I personally do is look at the feedback that other freelancers have left for them. Basic principle number 3. I probably should have made this the first basic principle, but, please, for the love of all that's good, read and reread what you plan to send as part of your proposal. No typos, no grammatical errors. Same should be said with your Upwork profile and any samples that you're going to use. The people that are your potential clients, they generally have no way of meeting you in person. Sure, they could talk to you through Skype, maybe over the phone, but slim to nil, unless you live in a major city like Chicago, New York, somewhere in California, slim to nil that you're ever actually going to meet your client in person. I don't think I've ever worked with anyone in Oklahoma through Upwork. So keep in mind what you're sending to them is a snapshot of who you are as a professional. Of course, if English is your second or third or 12th language, and let's say you're a web developer or graphic designer, you do get some leeway compared to those who want to write articles and books and other things in English. Just make sure that you come to an agreement with the client that you're providing your specific service, so the web design, the web development, graphics, whatever it is that you do, but that the client will provide their own content so that they're able to control the grammar and the tone for the site. Your life will be way easier if you follow my advice, I promise. If you're a writer and you're wanting to write in English and English is not your first language, you need to read and reread over and over and over. Do not rely on Google Translate. It's not always correct. Basic principle number 4, have an open and honest line of communication with your potential client, and also when or if they hire you, you need to hang on to that open line of communication. Nothing pisses a client off more than being ignored. Most will drop you for that faster than they will for you having a project and it not going as planned. If you have specific hours and days that you work, let them know. If you have a schedule change, let them know. Don't make them pay for your problems. Don't make excuses. I've found that an honest conversation in the beginning can go a long way to proactively solving future problems. Make sure that you and the client settle on a deadline or check-in time for the project. One of my mottos is under promise and over deliver, and don't take on projects you can't handle. I say no to potential clients on a regular basis. Right now, a lot of that is due to time constraints. I also ask them to keep me in mind in the future. Basic principle number 5, if you want to be top rated and also come up more in Upwork searches, make sure that you reply to every message and invitation within 24 hours of receiving it. That's tracked under your stats, which is found under the Find Work tab. So make sure that you know where to find that and you know what your stats look like. Okay, so let's talk about how I get clients to pick me. I'm going to go back in time to 4 or so years ago to get started. I had some Upwork experience. Upwork at that time was called Odesk, and they didn't have the top rated program. There was no such thing as a job success score. There weren't email lists that came out to top rated freelancers. You were pretty much on your own, just like any other small business. I had a handful of completed contracts and active contracts. My hourly rate was $10 an hour for a really long time. Then I raised it to $12, then $15, and then $20. I would fill up my schedule at one rate. Then I'd raise my hourly rate and go look for new clients. Some of my lower rate clients would just naturally begin to fall back because a lot of their stuff was slowing down. Then I'd give them a professional notice about my availability changing once I started bringing on clients who were paying more. I would end their contract after that, but I would never do that in the middle of an active contract. I always fulfilled my obligations. I also had flat rate projects I did at the time as well. So when I got up to $20 an hour, I found a listing on Upwork for a website that needed an editor. I applied. At that time, I had a basic cover letter for writing gigs, but I didn't really have one for editing, so I pretty much had to write a brand new cover letter. They mentioned specific things in the job description. They wanted someone with editing experience. I didn't have professional editing experience, not in the traditional sense, but having worked as a paralegal, I edited motions, responses, objections, discovery requests, discovery answers. I'd written deposition summaries. I've done all sorts of things. So I had some experience, and I also taught legal research writing 1 and 2. I had the capability, I just didn't have traditional editing experience. I told them about my teaching history. I told them about how editing fell into my responsibilities as a paralegal. I also ensured that I answered every single question they asked. I answered the questions that were in the job description. I answered the extra questions that they sent along that I could see during the application process. And then finally, when we began our dialogue, I answered every question that they had there too. I still work with this client, by the way. After we fulfilled the contractual obligation through Upwork, they became one of my private clients, and we only did that because it was just easier for them as far as billing was concerned. Now, today, I have almost 2,000 hours worked through Upwork. I've completed a total of 129 jobs. My hourly rate is more than double the last hourly rate I mentioned. I regularly turn away potential clients. As of April 8th, 2018, the day that this podcast is recorded, I have a 99% job success score. I've been top rated since top rated was invented around 2.5 years ago. If you want to convince a client to pick you for a high-paying gig instead of other freelancers, you must directly show them the benefit of choosing you. So, at this point in my career, I don't go out of my way to bid on anything. I have more than enough work between Upwork and a few private clients. Although Upwork says under the My Stats feature that my profile is viewed less than average, I am interviewed and hired more often than other freelance writers. So When a potential client does reach out to me, and sometimes I get 3 or 4 invitations a day, I know that if it's something I want to do, it's no problem. I can get that job. Why? Because I know how to talk to people in my cover letter or proposal, whatever you want to call it. So now what we're going to do is talk about the anatomy of my cover letters. My very first step is to read the job description in its entirety, even if it's something Upwork has asked me to apply for. Even if the client invites me, doesn't matter. I want to make sure it's something I can do. I want to make sure it's something I can do. Also, I want to look for areas where I can engage this client. So I'm looking for things that I can relate to them on through their job posting. My next step is to complete any of the extra questions asked in the application process. You know the ones I'm talking about. They actually come under the cover letter box in the application process. Do not write "see my cover letter" as your answer. When clients get your application, they get the answers to those questions first. They do not get your cover letter first, so just answer the damn questions. Then I write my cover letter. How I start depends on how I became aware of the opening. If I know their first name, I use it. Hi, first name, comma. Put a space, hit enter twice. Make sure there's space between your greeting and the rest of it. Do not have giant run-on sentences and paragraphs. It looks awful, hard for clients to read. Now, if I was invited, I say thank you for inviting me. That usually just says thank you so much for thinking of me. Sometimes I'll just say thanks for inviting me. If I initiated the application, which I haven't done in forever, I'll introduce myself. My name is Robin Bull. I'm one of Upwork's top-rated freelance writers and editors. If they're looking for a legal writer, education writer, whatever writer, I will say, my name is Robin Bull. I'm one of Upwork's top-rated freelance legal writer, education writer, business writer, whatever. Next, I express my interest, but I do it differently. I don't say I'm interested, hire me. I say I'm excited to learn more about your project. Then I go straight into bringing up items from their job description, and I have several reasons why I do this. First, I want them to know that I took the time to read it. Second, I want to highlight any relevant experience that I have that benefits them. What I'm going to read you next, and I know I gave you 2 reasons instead of several, but those are the most important ones. What I'm going to read you next is from an older cover letter that I used last year. I know that you mentioned you wanted individuals with portfolios that show industry experience. I have both business and legal writing experience. I am also experienced in education writing for high school and college levels. I continue to work with Penn Foster on their online courses and in instructional design. I've written and continue to write for Goldwater Law Firm. I've also written for lawyerist.com. Their focus is law practice management. Through Upwork, I've worked with several lawyers to provide blog and site content. I've worked with businesses to help them increase their online presence through organic SEO. You'll notice in my example that I used a lot of I sentences. Generally, that's not what I'll do. Cover letters should focus on the clients. What I just read to you, though, was specifically written to address areas the client mentioned they wanted in a writer: industry experience, blog and site content, organic SEO. I also highlighted my previous experience writing in the education field. Why did I do that? It shows my ability to change my writing style based on the target audience of a client. Next, I will use a declarative statement, or I will ask a question. So the same example from earlier, let me read to you my declarative statement. If you could tell me exactly what sorts of things you'd like to see, such as blogs, web content, or ebooks, I'd be happy to send you specific examples. In that sentence, I'm essentially asking them about their content needs and offering to send over samples. In short, I'm engaging them. I'm giving them something to respond to. Asking questions is also a powerful tool when you want a client to pick you for a high-paying gig. It shows that you're interested in learning, and it gives the client a way to engage with you. You should ask a question even if you don't really have one. So here's another example. This is one I actually sort of wrote on the fly. I said, thanks for the invitation to interview. As a paralegal, I can help you with that, although I need to get a bit more information from you. That's an extremely interesting concept. I can't wait to learn more about what you do for your clients. Do you have an idea of what you want in your welcome packet? I've designed and written lots and lots of welcome packets. I know what goes into most of them. But I paid her compliments about what she was proposing to do with her business. I expressed interest in wanting to learn more. I said I can't wait to learn more. And then I asked her a question. Do you have an idea of what you want in your welcome packet? Because although I've written welcome packets and I generally know what goes in them, there could be something that she wants that I generally wouldn't think to include. That would be her way of standing out. Then I told her the time that I usually work during the day. So she responded later that day with answers. She told me quite a bit actually, and I went on to give her more information to ensure that she knew what she actually needed for her business. Why would I give someone free information? Well, it builds trust. It highlights the fact that I'm an expert. It builds our connection. When she is truly ready to create her welcome packet, which will include contracts, she'll come back to me because she knows I'm honest and not just looking to give her a bunch of shit that she's not going to be able to use or that won't really help her. Other things that she and I talked about is where her business was located, where her clients were located. We talked quite a bit that day. In short, I set her up for a long-term relationship by just taking a few minutes out of my day to answer some questions. When I responded to her, finally, like the final one, I started my answer with, regardless of if you hire me or someone else. Why would I say that? Why would I pretty much put it in her head that she has the option to hire someone else? Well, she does, and I'm aware that she has it. Frankly, I'm not worried about losing her as a potential client. That one sentence shows her I'm in this to educate her. Most other contractors, they don't give a shit about what happens to their clients. They just want the money. I give a shit, and it's one of the things that make me stand out from others. Standing out from others in your particular area, that's what wins the gigs. Pay attention to what they say they want in responses. Pay attention to their job description. Engage them through questions. Don't say stupid shit like, please hire me right now. Hire me because I'm the best. Hire me because I'm the cheapest. Don't make weird demands. I get some weird demands on social media from other freelancers. Those weird demands mean I will never send them a job lead. Instead of saying, hire me because I'm the best, show them how you can benefit them. Instead of saying, hire me because I'm the cheapest, talk about the importance of budget or value. Again, what do they get for the money they pay you? One final note. Let me explain what I know happens to a lot of new freelancers who want advice from those of us who are successful. We go and explain our exact process, just like I've done in this podcast, and I'll probably turn this into a blog too. In a few weeks, sometimes months after we tell a new freelancer how to make money, they come back and they bitch about how it didn't work. I'll ask them if they specifically did what I told them to do. Generally, they lie at first and say yes, but then they turn around and say, but I changed this one thing because I think it's better to do X, or it's faster to do it this way or that way. Oh, okay, so you changed something out of a tried and proven formula and didn't get the right results. So what that means is that you did not do what you were supposed to do, and that's why you weren't successful. It has nothing to do with my method not working. It has to do with the fact you didn't follow it. The next tip I will give you, and I've already said this, read the job post carefully. Make sure you're qualified. When you send your response, write the answers to the extra questions first. Make sure that your cover letter addresses the needs of the client. Remember, engage the client. Ask a question or use a declarative sentence that is crafted to get more information. Don't demand that anyone hires you. Give out free information. It's not going to hurt you. Here's a bonus phrase for you that I like to use. I'll say something like, I've worked on similar projects in the past. Regardless of whether you hire me, I'd like to tell you the biggest problem I've seen occur from my experience. And then I give them that little short snippet of advice. Potential clients love it when they think they're getting valuable information from you for free. There is absolutely no foolproof way to get every single potential client out there to hire you. I still get people who don't want to hire me because of price, or they just like someone better, and that's fine. There's plenty of work out there to be had. So if I had to summarize this entire podcast, I would say this to you. Learn how to engage your potential client to create a connection with them. That will improve your chances of being hired. Upwork stats don't lie. I'm hired almost every single time that I agree to interview with someone. That's all I really have for you guys today. Make sure that you subscribe on Podbean, YouTube, iTunes, or wherever in the hell you found this podcast. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter as The Robin Bull, all one word. Questions, send them to me through social media. That's actually how this podcast was made. Someone had a question. This is my answer. Hate mail? Cool story, bro. Send it in. I reserve the right to make fun of you over it. Don't forget to visit confessionsfromthecouch.com and join the almost 1,700 subscribers there. Until next time.